The postcard arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, slipped under a stack of bills like it didn't know it was about to change everything. Ethan Miller picked it up without thinking, expecting another advertisement or reminder he couldn't afford. Instead, he froze. A bright beach filled the front. Blue ocean, white sand, 3 smiling faces under the sun. On the back, written in bold, playful ink, were words that made his chest tighten. "Wish you were independent like us. Don't miss us too much." Ethan stood in the small kitchen of the Ohio house he'd lived in since childhood. The same house that no longer felt like home. The refrigerator buzzed. A clock ticked loudly. Outside, a car passed, life moving forward while he stood still. They were in Hawaii. His dad, his stepmom Karen, and Lily, Karen's daughter. Another family vacation without him. Another reminder that he didn't belong. Karen had planned the trip loudly. She talked about it for weeks, making sure Ethan heard every detail. The hotel, the dinners, the excursions. She never once asked if he wanted to come. She never needed to. The night before they left, she leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, watching him wash dishes. "You know," she said lightly, "it's good for young adults to feel motivated. Maybe this time alone will push you to finally move out." Ethan didn't answer. He had learned that silence was safer. Richard, his father, sat at the table scrolling on his phone. He didn't look up. He never did when Karen spoke like that. Lily laughed. "Yeah, Ethan, time to stop freeloading." The word stuck. It always did. Freeloader, Ethan paid what he could. He bought his own groceries. He worked 2 jobs, one at a warehouse, one delivering food at night, but it was never enough in that house. To Karen, he was a reminder of a woman who came before. Her, a past she wished erased. Ethan's mother had died of cancer 2 years earlier. After the funeral, he had nowhere else to go. Savings were thin. His heart was thinner. His father told him, "Stay as long as you need." Karen smiled when he said it, but her eyes stayed cold. At first, Ethan thought things would improve. He believed time and effort would earn him respect. They didn't. Every meal felt like a test. Every conversation felt like judgment. Karen counted his days, his meals, his mistakes. She never yelled. She didn't need to. Her words were quiet, sharp, and constant. "You're still figuring things out. Must be nice not having real pressure. Some people your age are already homeowners." Richard never defended him, not once. Now they were gone, enjoying the ocean, while Ethan stood alone with a postcard that felt like proof he didn't matter. He read it again. "Independent like us." His hands shook slightly as he set it down. He looked around. The kitchen, the same chipped table, the same fading wallpaper. The same space where he once sat doing homework while his mom cooked dinner and laughed. That laugh was gone, and so was his place. Ethan sat at the table and stared at nothing for a long moment. He felt embarrassed for caring, angry at himself for hoping, tired in a way sleep never fixed. He thought about the nights he came home, late from deliveries, feet aching, only to hear Karen sigh loudly when he walked in. Another late one, she'd say, "Some of us have real jobs in the morning." He thought about the time Lily brought friends over and Karen joked, "Ignore." Ethan, he's temporary in the house he grew up in. Something inside him finally shifted, not with anger, but with clarity. He didn't need to prove anything to them. He needed to leave. That afternoon, Ethan went to his room and pulled a suitcase from the closet. He didn't pack everything. It's just clothes, his laptop, and a small photo of his mother smiling in front of Lake Michigan. She had loved Chicago, used to tell him it was a city where people reinvented themselves. "Don't have to stay where you're shrinking," she once said. He wrote a short note and placed it on the kitchen counter. "I'm leaving to figure my life out. I won't be back." He didn't explain. He didn't accuse. He didn't ask for permission. For the first time in a long while, the decision felt like his. 3 days later, Ethan locked the door behind him and walked down the driveway with his suitcase. The house looked the same as always. Quiet, indifferent. At the bus station, he bought a one-way ticket to Chicago. The bus was crowded and smelled faintly of coffee and rain. He took a window seat and watched Ohio blur past, feeling nervous and strangely light. As the miles passed, doubt crept in. What if he failed? What if Karen was right? What if he really was a burden? He pushed the thoughts away and focused on the road ahead. When the bus finally pulled into Chicago, it was evening. Rain tapped against the windows. The city lights reflected on wet pavement, bright and restless. Ethan stepped off the bus and pulled his jacket tighter. He felt small standing there, surrounded by strangers who all seemed to know where they were going. He checked into a cheap motel near the station. The room was plain and worn, but it was his for the night. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city through thin walls. For the first time since his mother died, no one was judging him. The next morning, Ethan walked the city with no plan. He passed coffee shops, bookstores, offices buzzing with life. He felt invisible and free. Near a quiet street, he stopped in front of a small bookstore with handwritten signs in the window. Something about it felt warm, safe. He stepped inside. The smell of paper and wood filled the air. Behind the counter stood a woman in her 60s with kind eyes. She looked up and smiled, looking for anything in particular. She asked. Ethan hesitated. Then he said the truth. Just a place to start. She nodded as if she understood more than he'd said. In that moment, Ethan didn't know it yet, but the life that began with a mocking postcard was about to turn into something else entirely. And far away under the Hawaiian sun, Karen laughed over drinks, unaware that the person she had pushed aside was quietly walking into his future. The rain hit hard that evening, drumming on the small motel roof like a warning. Ethan Miller stood under the awning, suitcase in hand, staring at the Chicago streets alive with lights and movement. He had left Ohio behind, left the mocking words of his stepmom and father, and yet, standing there, he felt the weight of uncertainty. Where did he go from here? Every step he had taken so far had been out of necessity, not courage. But tonight, for the first time in years, he decided it could be both. The city smelled like wet concrete and coffee, and something about it made him feel small yet free. He walked aimlessly until a warm light caught his attention. A bookstore, modest but inviting, tucked between a coffee shop and an old bakery. The windows were fogged with rain, and the words "New Arrivals" were handwritten in white chalk. Hesitant, he pushed the door open. The soft chime above announced him, and the smell of old paper and polished wood wrapped around him like a blanket. Behind the counter was a woman in her 60s, her silver hair tied back neatly, her eyes bright. She looked at him with a curious kindness, the sort that didn't ask too many questions. "Looking for anything in particular?" she asked. Voice calm, warm. Ethan hesitated, suddenly aware he didn't even know what he wanted. "Something to start over," he said finally, surprising himself. The woman smiled knowingly. "I think we have just the thing," she said, pulling a stack of journals and books from a nearby shelf. She didn't press him to explain, didn't judge. For Ethan, who had spent years being told he was a freeloader, it felt like a small miracle. That night, as the rain continued to fall, Ethan returned to his motel room carrying not just books, but a flicker of hope. The days blurred into work and small discoveries. The bookstore owner, Margaret, offered him a part-time position. He shelved books, greeted customers, and quietly observed the city. He had never felt so responsible for something that mattered. It was not a glamorous job, not a life-changing one at first glance, but it gave him a sense of purpose he had long forgotten. For the first time, his efforts weren't met with ridicule. Instead, they were noticed, appreciated. Then he met Claire. She appeared one Thursday evening, brushing raindrops off her coat, carrying a small umbrella. She moved with quiet confidence, browsing the shelves with a thoughtful air, pulling out novels and flipping through pages with care. When she looked up, their eyes met, and Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. A spark of connection that wasn't judgment, wasn't obligation, wasn't pity. Claire returned every week, drawn by a love of books, a love of thoughtfulness. Conversations started with recommendations and reviews, then moved to deeper questions about dreams, about life, about fear. She spoke softly but with clarity, as though she had known hardship and emerged wiser. Ethan found himself sharing parts of his story he had never told anyone. The postcard, the mocking words, the word freeloader that had haunted him for years. She didn't flinch. She didn't offer platitudes. She simply said, "People who mock others usually fear being needed less. You didn't fail them, they failed to see you." Those words hit harder than any anger or sadness could. For the first time, Ethan realized that the problem had never been him, it had been the people around him. Months passed. Ethan found an apartment, small but comfortable, and furnished it with books, memories, and quiet intention. He started writing again, pouring out thoughts and reflections in short essays he posted online. One went viral, then another. A magazine reached out for an interview. Then a national publisher expressed interest in his work. He had begun to build a life that was entirely his own. It was during this period of growth that Richard called. The voice on the other end was hesitant, uncertain, older. "Ethan," his father said, "I saw your name online. I didn't realize you were doing so well." Ethan leaned back in his chair, a calm settling over him he hadn't felt in years. "I didn't either," he replied. "Not when I was living there." A long pause followed. "I'm sorry," Richard said finally. "I should have protected you. I should have done more." Ethan didn't respond with anger. He didn't need to. The apology, though delayed, held little power over him now. It already found what mattered: independence, purpose, and self-respect. That evening, Ethan shared the news of his first book deal with Claire. They celebrated quietly in his apartment with takeout and laughter, simple but genuine. As they sat on the floor, surrounded by the warm glow of the city lights filtering through the windows, Claire rested her head on his shoulder. "They called you a freeloader," she said softly. "But look at you now. You've built a life from nothing." Ethan smiled, not with pride, but with relief. He no longer needed their approval. He no longer needed their validation. The people who had pushed him away, who had tried to belittle him, had unknowingly freed him to find his own path. He had discovered that sometimes the hardest moments, the words that cut the deepest scar, the ones that force us to grow, to seek something better. And as he sat there with Claire, the city humming around them, Ethan finally felt at home. Not because of the people he had left behind, not because of success, but because he had reclaimed himself. The postcard that had once felt like a weight in his hands now seemed almost trivial. Maui's beaches and sunlit smiles no longer mattered. What mattered was the quiet strength he had found in himself. The people who truly saw him and the life he had built, one small step at a time. Sometimes, those who try to keep you small end up giving you the push you never knew you needed. Ethan Miller had learned that lesson the hardest way. And now, far from the ridicule, he was living proof that resilience, courage, and a little kindness from strangers, from oneself, from love, could rewrite a life entirely. And in the soft glow of his apartment, with Claire by his side, Ethan knew that this was only the beginning. Not just of his career, not just of his love life, but of the life he deserved, one built on freedom, respect, and the quiet joy of being fully seen for who he really was.